This series of short videos is sponsored by the Kentucky Rifle Foundation to share the knowledge and research of select Kentucky Rifle Association members. This video was filmed at the 2024 Contemporary Long Rifle Association annual show in Lexington, Kentucky.
I'm Brian LaMaster, and I've been restoring, collecting, and building rifles for about 38 years. And it's fun to be able to share these things and have the pleasure of enjoying these things with everyone. I've been restoring and collecting for almost 38 years. I find that I enjoy each one because everyone's different. Every single gun comes in the shop is totally different. And I started out building rifles, and then it turned into that I started restoring them because I couldn't necessarily afford a perfect one myself. So I bought a clunker, and I was happy with my little piece of junk, and I'd bring it home and I'd fix it. And then I started doing it for other collectors and friends. And it just kind of made a lot of good friends through the years with a lot of nice people. And they've shared their collections, and they've shared information with me over the years. And I learn on every single gun that comes.
So what got you started then initially in long rifle culture?
Well, I was working for my dad, and I went to a neighbor's house, and he had some rifles in the beams of his cabin, and I thought, man, these are really cool. And at the time I realized it's like, and he even said, you know, they're okay, but he helped me build my first rifle. And then he said, you need to meet a guy named Keith Castile. And so when I met Keith, and he was building out over the top pieces, I thought, this is for me. And so he was nice enough to share with me and help me build the first gun. Then I started building the next gun, and the next thing you know, it turned into a business. And I've been building full-time since, I forget what year it was, 1987 or 9 or something like that.
What would you say the general classes are of a long rifle for a collection?
If you're building a collection, I think you have to look at a couple different things. Some collectors collect regional. If they're in North Carolina, they want North Carolina guns, or if they're in Pennsylvania, they want Pennsylvania guns. Then you get into categories like maybe the county. You may say, I'm a Berks County collector, and so you put your focal point on that particular region. And then you've got makers, so you may say, hey, I want a J.P. Beck, or I may want Nicholas Byer or Bedford County guns. And so most collectors are pretty discerning, especially as time goes on and they see more guns and they learn more. And I think that's where the focal point is. You can collect high artwork, so you can get a gun that's either carved or inlaid, but there's a lot of nice simple guns out there that you can collect that are inexpensive, but you still get a nice gun. I go by architecture. I always say never buy an ugly gun. So architecturally, take a nice gun that has a good shape to it. It doesn't have to have a patch box to be a beautiful piece. Then if you get into pieces that have patch boxes, that normally adds to the value of them, or even the carving side. So collecting Kentuckys it's a pleasure to be able to handle new stuff.
What are the key factors that determine value in terms of price for an antique arm like this?
Most of the time it's condition and the level of artwork that you're dealing with, or the rarity. If you have a gun that maybe there's only 2 pieces known by that particular maker, then the value is much stronger because there's only just those 2 pieces. So the rarity side comes, if you only have a maker that there's only 2 known examples, then you're going to find that the value is higher on that. But if a gun is in perfect condition, which is very rare, because you have to keep in mind they were tools. Tools provided food for the family, protection for the family, whether they're using in the military, connection in some vein. And that takes its toll on the gun. So you have a certain level of restoration that has to be done to maintain the gun in period when it was being used. But you also have restoration that was done in the past, 100 years for collectors. And that makes a difference. A gun that has almost zero restoration is valued higher, or should be higher, than one that has a lot of restoration. You can have 2 guns of the same maker, and one has a lot of replaced components and one doesn't. So the one that's more original to when it came off the bench of the hands of the builder should be valued at a higher price. They're much harder to find because most of the guns were used and they were not abused, but they were used.
Maybe abused in terms of today's standards.
Yes, and sometimes they're abused by kids and families that played with them when they were obsolete as a weapon that was being used for family and food, but yet the kids, they let the kids take them, or they turned them into hog rifles. Sometimes you'll see guns that were cut off and they kept them in the barn just to shoot hogs at butcher time.
What kind of questions should one ask the seller of a long rifle that you might be interested in adding to your collection?
If you're going to add a gun to your collection, number one, make a circle of collectors that you're friends with, and then talk to them and see what the reputation of the seller is. If a seller has a spurious reputation, that's not somebody you really want to do business with. Or if they have something you really like, because it's a small world out here in the collecting world, find somebody you trust to take with you, so when you go to look at a gun, even from the spurious guy, you have somebody with good eyes that can tell you, hey, the repairs are here, here, and here on a gun. So if you're going to ask questions of any collector or of any dealer, ask them what's been done to the gun. And the key is, if you pick up a rifle and you're holding it, if you see one screw or one inlay that looks to be replaced, as soon as you see that, it tells you it's been on someone's bench at some point. And at that point, I always say you have to turn the magnification up on your examination. If you see one screw fixed or repaired on it, that tells you somebody's restored it or had some level of repair. So what you do is you basically turn up the magnification as in you start to look at the places you expect to see a certain. Also use your hands. When you get an old gun in your hands, they don't normally, because especially a used gun, doesn't have sharp edges. And that goes with the wood. If you feel the wood and you come out, like a lot of times with forearms, people, they hand me a gun and say, what do you think? And the first thing I do is I pinch it with my finger and run out there with your hand. And most of the guns are made out of curly maple, and you see this ripple effect. You can feel that with your finger. It's like a washboard. And so if you come down through here and it's got a ripple, and all of a sudden it's real smooth, and then it goes back to a ripple. If you feel that in your hands, you look here first, because there's some reason that that's smooth. And most of the time that's because it's had restoration. So you can feel it. Barrels are the same way. If you run your hand down, you feel the texture of a barrel, and all of a sudden you hit either a really smooth spot or a very coarse one. That's where you start to look closer for any discoloration on the metal, because that'll tell you whether a barrel's been stretched. Also, if a gun has been, and people always say stretch, what do you mean stretch? In the life of a Kentucky rifle, as it was shot, the rifling many times would get shot out on the muzzle and the breech. So where that bullet sets back here, so you have your powder charge, you have a patch with a round ball, where that patch sets, there's a level of corrosion that happens there, and it makes a ring inside. So what it does is it makes a gas release, so you lose gas pressure when the explosion goes off. What they would do is just clip off an inch or maybe 2 inches of barrel, move the barrel back, and what it does, it puts the ball in a brand new spot. And when you see that, sometimes they'll be cut off of here, at times they'll be cut off the front end, or both. If that happens, if somebody's going to restore the gun back to its original state when it comes off of the maker's bench, he has to extend the barrel or stretch it. So I've had people say, you mean you stretch it? No, what you actually take a stub of another barrel, normally an original, and you weld it to the back or the front of the barrel to make it its original length. And when that happens, when the barrels are shortened, two things will happen. It'll move these pins. So it'll move a pin, move a pin, move a pin. It'll move them back. There's two ways that it'll change. They'll either move the pins on the bottom, the loops on the barrel, or they'll make another set of keyholes. So if you're looking at a rifle and you say, okay, the barrel's been shortened, look here, because there might be a wood infill where the key went from there to there. And you're looking to see whether that's happening. Also, a lot of people, you get a gun, not always are these pipes perfectly spaced. Most makers, yes. But I take my hand and you just measure it out. And so you're looking at the space that's left. And the majority of the time, if these are evenly spaced, if this one's way back here, that tells you the gun's been shortened at some capacity and pulled back a little bit. Also, guns were converted from flintlocks to percussion. Most of that happened in the 1830 and beyond. And so when that happens, they're taking the hammer off of it, they're cutting the drum off, or the pan, they're removing the frizzen spring, and then they put what's called a drum with a nipple in it. And so the drum and the nipple is for the newest innovation, which is the percussion cap. And the fulminated mercury that's in the percussion cap is very corrosive. And what it does is it eats away at the barrel really hard, and it also makes the wood on the top side, just behind the cap itself, it makes it real pethy because the mercury gets absorbed in it and it turns it to pumice powder. So if a gun was shot a long time with a percussion cap and didn't have some shield that got it away, the wood will get rotten here and the wood will rot on the front and the back of the lock. And so when these guns are put back to flint, the pan's put on there and welded, and then these new parts are affixed to the gun. But normally they'll need a piece of wood here and a piece of wood here. And that's because the mercury in those caps just absolutely just tears the wood apart, takes the whole structure out of it together. But those are a couple common things. Other stuff you're looking for are maybe a piece of wood back here at the toe on the corner. A lot of times the gun gets set or hit here. What it does, it fractures that corner out, and so these little kind of repairs are fairly common. But those are a couple of a few things there that you're looking for. And like I said earlier, use your hands because you're feeling for texture, but you're also, just like lock parts, like if I'm rubbing my hand over a gun, and some good restorers are really good at smoothing things out. They think about that when they fix a gun. A lot of restorers, especially 40, 50 years ago, if it had a pan, a frizzen, and a part, it was fine. They just wanted to aesthetically make it a flintlock. But if you run your hand across and it's real sharp, and yet you run across the rest of the gun and it's smooth, that tells you there's probably something happening there that's a new repair, not something that's really old.
If you have an original, how should you approach cleaning and restoration?
Most of the time I go with the adage of less is better. If you have a family gun or a gun comes to you that's in the black, and in the black just means it has a lot of grunge on it. It's a terminology. A lot of collectors used to think they had to strip and clean every single gun that came down the pipe. And that adage really ruined a lot of guns of the original surface. My feeling has always been the guns that make me the happiest is when you're putting your hand in the same place of the guy that shot it the last time that shot that gun. That's special. You know, you're touching something that's the way he used it. And to take all that, you know, there's a few times if the gun's been someplace in a barn or something that's absolutely filthy, you can use like a Murphy's oil soap and a tiny bit of water. It'll remove a lot of stuff without taking your finish off, without skinning and stripping. Turn of the century in the early 1900s, a lot of people would strip the whole entire gun, put a heavy coat of varnish over the entire thing. In that case, you need to get it to a restorer that's reputable, that can peel that varnish off, try to put some color back. Because the worst thing that happened is many of the times when they strip those guns, they put them in a lye bath. And the lye absolutely just bleaches all the color out of the wood itself. And it makes the gun just look pale. So I try to get all that varnish off and then get some natural color. It helps if you know what the maker, if you've seen other work by it. So this is a Melchior Fortney. What you do is you look at a gun that hasn't been messed with and try to get the color of the gun back to what you've seen on his work before, because they all use different stain techniques and colorations and stuff.
Can you suggest any recommended resources for further information and involvement?
I believe going to gun shows is a good thing, and find people that you like and you trust, learn from them, and you'll find like the Kentucky Rifle Foundation, the Kentucky Rifle Association are good organizations to get involved with. There's lots of mini shows, not lots, but there's enough mini shows you can go out and be a part of a show with people, and you make friends that way. You get to see a lot of stuff. A lot of the collectors bring things and put them on the tables. Like I try to bring stuff and show it. Not everything is for sale that they're showing. They're sharing all their collections. And it'll give you a chance to handle pieces so you kind of figure out what you really like. If you're buying stuff through auction, it's a little dangerous sometimes when you're purchasing without putting your hands on something. You're relying on descriptions that hopefully the person that's logging and cataloging knows what's happening with the pieces themselves. Kentucky rifles are one of those things that I like them and I've loved them because they're different from Winchesters and Colts. If you've seen one Colt or one Winchester, you've seen 2,000. Where you can have one maker and say, oh, I've seen a lot of his work. Well, a lot means maybe 20. And every single piece they made, especially in the Golden Age era, in the earlier, between the 1770s to probably 1840s or 50s, a lot of those guns, the trigger guards are all different. The patch boxes are different. Their carving techniques are different. And these are skilled gunsmiths that are not always self-trained, but many times self-trained. And you have to keep in mind, in that period of time, they did not have the ability to open up a book or get on the internet to see other people's work. They may have seen it at a Sunday shoot. They may have seen it at a militia gathering where there's a lot of guys getting together. That's where their influences came. But they're so individual. I mean, you look at a piece of work in the same county, you can look at a Melchior Forney or somebody else that's working across the county, and their work is totally different. And I think that's the part, when you hold it, you're holding a piece of history. And that history, once in a blue moon, you'll find a gun that has an owner's name on it. So you can track the history of the gun through the family because you have the owner's name. But most of the time, they may have the builder's initials or name on the top of the gun itself, which is a bonus. If you're looking at a rifle, you want to know who made it, you look here first, because that tends to be the average place where you'll find the initials to work off of.
Thank you very much, Brian, for taking the time with us and walking us through a little bit of this.
You're welcome. I hope this helps.
We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
For more resources on collecting, research, high-quality photos, and more, visit KentuckyRifleFoundation.org. To get a taste of what the KRF offers with their extensive resource libraries, visit the Kentucky Rifle Foundation Facebook page. I'd like to extend a special thanks to the Kentucky Rifle Foundation for sponsoring this short series of videos. And a special thanks to Brian for his willingness to share his history and his knowledge here with you and future generations.